Apologies for the technical difficulties there. I'm Ed Bottomley with the Michigan Medicine Department of Communication, and I will be your host for today's chat on social distancing and kids. So caring for children during the COVID-19 outbreak can mean more than just practicing good hygiene. When social distancing is a must, establishing routines, behavior management, and information on how to schedule your day can help provide some structure in a time of uncertainty. I'm here with Developmental Behavioral Pediatrician Dr. Jenny Radesky to get some answers on your questions on this topic. First though, just a few housekeeping items on how you can take part in this chat. You can submit questions at any time, even now, for Dr. Radesky to answer during the Q&A portion of today's chat. Questions can be submitted by commenting on this video, but please note that your name or your profile name will be visible to others participating on this. If you prefer a more anonymous option, you can also send us a private message or email us at ask-mishmed@med.umich.edu. That's ask-mishmed@med.umich.edu. If you can't stay for this whole chat or you want to share the recording with a friend, a video of the chat in its entirety will be available on our CSMOT and Michigan Medicine Facebook pages, as well as our Michigan Medicine YouTube account and our Mott Children Twitter account. So lots of places for you to share. So before we move on to our questions with our expert, Dr. Radesky, I believe you have a little bit of an intro for us as well.
Yep, I just wanted to introduce myself. I wanted to say hi to the parents watching in our Michigan Medicine community. This is our third day of coronavirus school closures, which has just been an unprecedented challenge for all of us parents on how to do this. And so I first just wanted to, say to everyone that we're really grateful for all this extra work that parents are doing right now. In the medical community, we really are grateful that parents are taking this public health step to collectively help contain transmission of the coronavirus. Just to let you know a little bit about myself, I'm a developmental behavioral pediatrician here at Mott Hospital and at Ypsilanti Health Center. I see kids with autism, ADHD, behavioral difficulties, learning difficulties. I'm happy to answer questions about things your kids might be experiencing with this change in routines that they're having. If any of my patients' parents are watching, please give your kids high fives for me. But I'm really kind of eager to start being able to see them in person again. I know it's very different for us all to now have this distance between each other. Even Ed and I are keeping our almost 6-foot distance here. And this feels very different. It feels different emotionally. It feels different logistically with how we run our lives. So we wanted to put this chat together to answer your questions about how to do it. I'm also a mom. I'm a mom of a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old. So we're all adjusting to this at home as well. And I'm happy to speak as a parent about different things I've heard that have been helpful for parents. And finally, I'm a researcher. I do research on media and technology and use by kids and parents. So please post questions having to do with managing kids' tech time and tech use during this time that we're now trying to keep them occupied at home. And I also wanted to say, I do my best work when I'm speaking to what parents really need help with. So really, post your questions. Nothing is considered a dumb question. We're happy to answer. And again, thank you. I know that it may seem odd about all of a sudden in the past 5-6 days, we've been asked to shut down restaurants, bars, and schools, and all of a sudden be working from home or keeping our kids home. I wanted to explain the reason behind this, because it maybe will help everyone feel a little bit more of this collective work that we're doing together. Kids right now don't experience a lot of symptoms from coronavirus in many of the studies coming out of China. Some of them may have no symptoms, some of them may just have mild symptoms. So that's why with all the energy that kids have and all of the impulse that they have to grab things and put things in their mouths or to hug people, they are thought to be possibly transmitting virus more than other members of the community. And that's why school closures are so important to keep kids distanced from one another. It's so hard. My 10-year-old today just said to me, this will be devastating if I can't see my friends for another couple of weeks or a couple months, whatever it turns out to be. And we recognize that emotional reaction that families are having too. So please send us questions about both the emotional things you're coping with, as well as just the logistical issues of keeping your kids busy and separated during this time.
Thank you so much for that intro. I know we have quite a few questions already. In terms of structure and schedules, what is the best way to try to do social distancing with young kids?
So kids really respond well to structure. In my patients, especially those who might have ADHD or self-regulation problems, they really like having external structure. They like a predictable order of events. They like that it's the same thing every day. It helps them know, well, I know what's coming up next. Many of us don't really feel like we know what's coming up next, and a lot of parents are just taking this day by day. But for kids, we really can give them this sense, nope, we're going to do this at this time, this at this time. So you decide as a family when you want that to be. In my family, we decided we'd start the same time that school usually starts at 9, and then we would just make a plan. It might be math first, then it might be writing. If you don't have assignments from school teachers about those specific things, we're kind of making it up as we go. I told my husband the first day, this is a success as long as you don't wind up in the emergency room. Like, I am happy with anything that happens at school, at this homeschool that we're creating from scratch, right? Teachers have been amazing. They're just sending out all these ideas for kids to do, but sometimes parents, you can make things up too. In our family, we had science class was all making paper airplanes yesterday and seeing how different tweaks of the wings made them fly different ways. And I think that part of playful learning is good for parents too, because it helps you de-stress a bit. Now, structure can be hard if you yourself are trying to work from home. So laying out, and it might be on a blackboard, if you have a whiteboard at home, if you just have a place where you can write it down on paper so everyone can see predictable times that parents might be working on their computers or doing what they need to do, and kids will hopefully be engaged independently in their own tasks. Or there might be times you set aside for some positive media use that might be doing some of the apps that your kids have been doing at school. In Ann Arbor schools, it's Dreambox and Lexia and other things that they're used to, so they can do that for some time. Or you can find some good tips for positive media use from Common Sense Media, or PBS Kids is always a good place to go to if you want some calm, positive messaging coming at your kids at a time that you really don't want them up and fighting and excited or getting scared by other content they may be coming up with on media.
I think that's a fantastic answer to that question. A little bit of a follow-up. What age ranges are appropriate for this? How young are we talking here?
Kids, even from infancy, structure really helps. Even infants start to know the flow of your day. What's the time that we usually get up and do our meals or our feeds? What are the times that we usually sit on the floor and have playtime? So there's no age too young for structure, and it helps you as a parent to know what's going to happen next. I mean, I remember being home with my babies when they were infants, and the day just felt structureless. It felt like it was just bleeding from one into another. I want to avoid that for families, because that can sometimes be anxiety producing, because you just don't know what's coming next and you feel like you don't know what you got done that day. So even for toddlers or preschoolers who are home from their child care centers, you can set up, and it might be with a picture schedule where you make little pictures of what you're going to do, or you set timers. Kids really respond well to timers, so you can get timers for your smartphone, you can use a kitchen timer, you can even, for kids who can read the clock, you set out a schedule by the clock. Once you get kids into elementary school, middle school, and high school, they're used to the structure of the day, and you really can just make it based on time of day. But some kids who have a hard time keeping track of time, you might want to set those timers, either if they have a watch that they can do it, or one that is they're kind of whatever in their workspace.
Perfect. And the next question, kind of following on from that theme, if I have to balance work and can't spend a whole day working with my kids, is it better to do half days of school structure and let the other half be unstructured, perhaps with screens, or is it better to alternate days, structured day followed by an unstructured
Good question.
day?
I think that's the most you can keep things same day to day or predictable day to day. Kids generally have an easier time with that. When kids have on, off, they may have a harder time adapting to that, especially kids who might have ADHD, self-regulation issues, or autism, or anxiety may have a harder time with those change-ups. So if it's possible, again, we all are kind of being very resourceful and making things up as we go. So if you can do it with your job, where you have a couple hours that you get some concentrated work done in the morning while the kids are occupied doing other things. I've also heard some families say they're kind of doing flipped days, where the mornings when the parents need to get a lot of work done, the kids are doing more of the media time. And then in the afternoon, when the parents have less work obligation, they play more together. They do more social activities, more arts and crafts, more walks around the block or things like that. It really is something for you to think about as a family. Kids are gonna have more of a buy-in and want to follow the plan more if they have a say in it too. So having a little family meeting where you each talk about what you want to get done in the day, writing it out and all agreeing on it, you'll have kids hopefully following that a little bit better.
Sure. And then our audience question, how do you keep kids busy after they're done with homework? And what are good ways to keep kids engaged for longer durations of time?
Yeah. I was on a show with an educational expert a couple days ago. I really liked what she said, that parents should expect that kids are only really going to have a few hours of like curricular materials to do. It's going to vary depending on what grade they're in and how much they've been assigned. But don't expect that their school day of them being occupied with work is going to last from, say, 9 to 4. It may just be a couple hours in the morning. So the rest of the time, if you parents need to get work done or need to do things like caring for and checking in with an elderly grandparent or other things to support your community, you may need your kids to be occupied. We all know that screen media keeps kids pretty well occupied, but it sometimes displaces the other activities that we need either for learning or just for emotional connection during stressful times. So that's why I've been working with the American Academy of Pediatrics. I helped write their screen time guidelines in 2016. We put out some new suggestions that I tweeted out yesterday, but that the American Academy of Pediatrics has also been messaging around to say, really, as you restructure your day, preserve some of the unplugged offline times where you and your family can do the things that help you cope, help you connect, help you heal, help you feel, the kind of human connection that's really hard to feel right now as we're experiencing social distancing. That's not to say that some of that human connection can't happen through media. I mean, now we're all so grateful for video chat, for some of the social media outreach that we're able to do to other people, for emails from school superintendents and teachers. I mean, we're all feeling this great appreciation of the technology that keeps us connected, even though we physically have to stay apart. So the question about keeping kids occupied, here are some non-screen keeping kids occupied ideas. Number one, audiobooks. We've found that to be extremely successful in my family. I hope if you have a kid who can pay attention to listening to a story told by a really good storyteller, that's one way to keep them occupied for an hour or 2 hours, especially if it's a really good book, like some of the Harry Potter series, the How to Train Your Dragon series. Of course, I'm thinking all like books that my boys like, but talk to your kids about what books they've been wanting to read, even if it's stuff that would be a couple grades up, because you can understand a really good story without having to read it through an audiobook. A lot of public libraries are making audiobooks available. So if you have a device that can play audiobooks or podcasts, those are both really good ways to keep kids intellectually engaged while they're being, occupied. Also think, who's your kid, right? What does your kid really get absorbed in? It varies child to child. So it might be artwork for some kids. You can give them a pencil and a paper and they will just draw different things. Sometimes you need to give them hints. You might need to give them like the dog man instructions in the back of the book for how to draw Dogman or how to draw Pokemon, or you could find so many things on YouTube of different artists doing how-to videos right now. For other kids, it's taking things apart with their hands. They love to work with their hands. They might like to do a little bit of yard work if you have green space around your house. They might want to do some heavy work of lugging things and helping you with things. Other kids, it might be that they get, really absorbed in music, that they might want to just take an instrument and go work with it, and encourage that sort of independence. We all feel a little frustrated when we have to prompt our kids all the time, do this, and they kind of need our management. This is a time to encourage kids to have those independent stretches of time where their mind is taking the lead and their mind is working on something. And it doesn't need to be super academic right now. It could be something that's really creative or playful. They could write a story. They could write a letter to someone that they miss right now. You can really let them come up with some ideas too.
That is fantastic. Personally, I think you described all of my kids
in
that description there. So the next question, how can I keep my 6-year-old informed about what's going on? I'm not sure she quite understands everything, but she has shown stress and is obviously upset over school closing.
Right. I don't know if all adults fully understand everything either. And so letting kids know, the best way to message to them is with some reassurance and confidence that you'll take care of them. That it is good to let kids know about germs because it's why we wash our hands. It's why we use hand sanitizer or something else before we eat. We have to give them a reason behind some of the new behaviors we're asking them to do, like not putting their fingers in their mouth if they can control it. Kids behaviorally always respond better to our instructions if we give them a reason. You can describe it just like other fevers or colds or flus that they've had before. But one of the ways I've described it to my family, and I've heard this from other doctors too, is that it's a virus that right now is affecting people who are more vulnerable or have a weaker health, are a little bit older, and those more vulnerable people in our society are the ones we need to protect, and that's why we're doing it. It's not about, I'm scared for me, I'm scared for you. It's a bit of a shift that we think more about the collective group rather than just each of our individual risks. So it's hard. Kids are frustrated, right? So my 10-year-old wanted to bike to Dairy Queen on Sunday and was like, why can't I go? I want to go. And I said, well, you may be standing in line with people. You may, and I'm sorry, no offense to Dairy Queen that we eventually bailed on this idea, but I said, how about you take a bike ride around the block and we'll see if we have some ice cream in the fridge or something like that. And he stormed away from me and stomped his foot. He probably said something like, I'm the worst parent. But I've learned how to handle that from kids, and I think that's something that a lot of parents are struggling with too. You watch your kids' disappointment, and it hurts. You're like, I wish I didn't have to tell you not to go do that fun thing that I usually let you do all the time in the summer. I wish I didn't have to say, no, you can't go over to your friend's house where you love playing video games with them, right? That sort of tolerance of the distress your child feels and the way you feel is it's a big learning curve for a lot of us. So the more we can explain to kids why this is important, it's something we're all changing our behavior to protect the doctors and the nurses and the other people who work in hospitals, and also to protect the people in our community that might get sicker from the virus. That'll hopefully help kids get over their frustration a little bit more and start to have that empathy, that empathic thinking that we hope will make them feel more okay.
Absolutely, and this almost perfectly flows into this next audience question that we have. My teenager is struggling with not being able to have his social time at school and after-school sports. He's struggling with the current outlook and uncertainty of not knowing when his social life will be back to normal. Mm-hmm. What can I do to help ease his anxieties, and any suggestions for other socialization ideas? Teen years are hard as it is.
Yeah, there's this is a time where we're grateful that kids have connections to one another on social media. I would recommend maybe them setting up some time for, research has shown that people actually feel more emotionally connected or meaningfully connected after video chat or one-to-one texting, rather than it always being a big group thing. Because when it's a group chat, I mean, those are still fine, and sometimes you get a lot of funny banter between friends on social media or on group chats, but you don't get as much of that, you know, interpersonal connection of like, hey, how are you doing? You know, and sometimes it's helpful for a teenager to talk with one of their friends in more of a real way about how each of them are coping. So encouraging them to, you know, see if their friends will schedule times like that. Now kids, it's still fine for kids to go, you know, take a bike ride together, take a walk together. I'm noticing in my neighborhood there are some teenagers kind of like skateboarding together or, you know, walking their dogs. You still get to talk, you just don't share food. You know, don't go out if you are sick and have upper respiratory symptoms or a fever or other things like that. But you still can get some outdoors time with a little bit more face-to-face with friends. And then for teenagers who are dealing with that sort of uncertainty, you know, kids in general do well with using their imagination and some of their magical thinking for coping. So getting them not only to kind of escape into their imagination with books or movies or other things like that, but also letting them channel that anxious energy somewhere. So it might be creative, it could be writing, it could be music, it could be some other, you know, creative channeling, or it may be service that helps kids channel that feeling of uncertainty. I don't know what's going to happen in 2 months or 3 months. I don't know what's going to happen necessarily in 2 or 3 weeks. So right now, what are we doing right now? Right now, maybe I'll help mom with dinner. You know, I know that's easier said than done. You know, I've heard a lot of families saying they're working not only on education in terms of reading, writing, arithmetic, and social studies and all the other curricular materials, they're working on their child's kind of life skills around helping out, pitching in. If you have work to do around the house, if you have, you know, there are community organizations that are accepting healthy volunteers to do some work around food distribution or other things like that. So again, helping kids not dwell on the anger or fear or uncertainty that they're feeling, channeling that energy, and also helping them just check in with their bodies and their minds and say, okay, I'm feeling this way right now, what can I do about it? That sort of problem-solving mindset is really good to encourage amongst parents and kids right now.
Perfect. And since you started to bring this up, you touched on this a little bit. We have a couple of questions that I can merge into one. If kids want to have play dates, what's the best way to do this? Indoors, outside, are playgrounds safe? And specifically, is it safe to go outside and play as long as my kids are just playing with each other? That's the other question we have.
So what I've heard from the infectious disease and epidemiology experts is playing outside with a degree of distance is good. And when I say a degree of distance, it's, you know, that you're not all playing with the same toys, that you're kind of sharing and touching and doing things like that. So finding activities where you might be kicking a ball around, or you might be walking a dog, or you might be skateboarding or using your own bicycle. Those are all activities that I've heard are fine because you're really kind of containing your contact just with your own materials. Playgrounds can be, like any surface you touch, can keep germs on them, and studies have suggested up to several days. So if you have children who are not great at washing their hands afterwards, or who you think may, you know, otherwise get contact from those playground materials, I would encourage you to instead try and find creative ways to, most playgrounds have at least a field near them, so find other ways to, we took our paper airplanes into our nearby field, you know, yesterday next to our playground. You know, my son started running up to the playground step and I was like, stop, no, let's not. And it's not that if he touched any of those, you know, playground materials that I would have been instantly worried about him. It's just the more we can do to limit potential contact on the grand scale, on the scale of the hundreds and thousands of people in Michigan and the hundreds of thousands of people in the United States, every teeny little bit does help. So again, I know that's hard to hear, that kind of hard line, lack of contact between, not having other kids come into your basement to play video games, not having, the kids running from house to house. It's just simply because those are easier ways that you're touching surfaces and you're potentially spreading germs. Thank goodness it is spring, because the weather's getting warmer and we're able to find more, activities outside. And see if your family can engage in them too. I mean, there's so many different parks, that at this point are still open. There's outdoor spaces where you can really just slow your mind down a little bit. You can look at what buds are forming on the trees. You could see what birds are returning. You can see, I sometimes look at the squirrels and I'm like, these squirrels have no idea what's going on in the human world. Like, they are just so lucky. And you kind of have to take, stock of just the natural world moving on around us, and with some hope that as things advance and we get more time to do things like develop a vaccine or get some summer into the, into our environment, that, with that hope that things will pass at some point.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for that. We've got a lot of questions coming in. The next one, and it's almost two questions here. How do I manage childcare help? Either around a few other kids or possibly grandparents if that's the only option. And this leads into another audience question. Is it safe to play and spend time with grandkids?
We're recommending that children not be spending time with grandparents. I know that is really, really hard, especially when grandparents are help in terms of childcare at home, and also because it's what gives us joy. And the reason is, like I said before, children may have very, very mild symptoms with coronavirus from the very same virus that may cause grandparents to get much sicker. So, have some phone conversations, some video chat conversations with grandparents, and see if you could schedule some regular time that might just be touching base electronically on a regular basis. I've been checking in on my parents like almost every day, just so they can say hi to the kids, and then I can check in on them as well. When it comes to childcare, I recognize that this virus is really making it clear how hard it is for some families to find the childcare they need, right? We very much depend on schools to take care of kids while we get our necessary work done. We may not have all of the social supports to be able to find someone to take our kids in a pinch. So we definitely recognize that if you need to have your child dropped off at someone's house, or have a nanny come, or there be two children watched, like, if you have to make those arrangements, of course you have to. But being careful about the day, every day checking in on symptoms. Has anyone been having fever or runny nose or respiratory symptoms? Has anyone been in a known contact with someone who might have had flu-like symptoms or coronavirus symptoms, so that you at least are communicating without guilt or judgment, and just being able to switch things up if things change and you're not able to get the same child care that you had before. And one thing I wanted to say is that parents too, I hope, can talk with their employers too about that sort of flexibility right now. I've said to my research staff, they do not need to be accessible to me, all hours of the day. I want them to go out and take walks and take care of their own well-being while they're working from home, because this is such a different adjustment that we're all making.
Absolutely. The next question we have: how do I social distance my low-risk children from my high-risk child without creating a feeling of division in my home?
Well, I'm hoping now that kids are out of school. The number one place that we think that kids would be transmitting germs to one another is either in school or childcare settings. So now that we're keeping kids out of the school setting and you're able to just manage them at home and you're able to kind of manage who comes in and out of your home, I hope that you have more reassurance that you're able to maintain the low-risk children's health at the same time. Maintaining their good health is basically what you'd be doing to protect your higher risk child. And so this means minimizing kind of trips out to the grocery store or out into the community, planning out your menu a week in advance, and trying to just limit the number of outings that you might need. If one of them did develop symptoms, you could see if you have enough space in your house for one of them, the kids with symptoms to have one little area. I mean, we did this with the flu with my kids because my younger son has asthma. And so we were like, this is your section of the couch. And these are the books that you're going to read during this week. And this is, we're going to manage the remote control, and other things that the ill child is touching versus the healthy children. So finding that physical distance, being in different rooms, different objects that they're touching, not being around food preparation, and making sure you have enough tissues and things so that kids who are coughing or have runny noses can immediately grab it and cover.
Great. So then the next question we have, and thank you so much for answering all of these questions. We're about halfway through now, so we'll power through, we'll get more answered, is on the topic of what should I do if my child is missing out on therapy related to their health condition?
Right.
And we have a specific audience question. What should parents whose kids can't get special education services like OT and speech do to help them?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I've been thinking about it for my own patients. So first is, let's talk about the therapies or interventions that would happen in the school setting. So most children who have special education or therapy needs at school, usually as part of their day, they get pulled out, into a therapy room and get that one-on-one instruction. I don't know this, but it's worth asking the school therapists from your child's school. Most families have their emails or are able to get their emails from the teacher. What activities can I do to kind of, do my own version of that one-to-one teaching? Tell me the skills that you were working on. Tell me the sort of books you were reading Now, of course, parents aren't trained in special education. I'm not pretending that all of us can suddenly pretend to be speech therapists. But a lot of therapists are really great at breaking down the activities that they would do with the child. Occupational therapists might give a list of the sort of sensory activities that they might do, or some of the handouts that they might use. So we can try to do a little bit of that at home. I haven't heard of any school-based therapists to be able to do video chat-based therapy, but I don't know. I mean, people are creative thinkers, so there may be some ways to ask for that. When it comes to outpatient therapies, so if your child has a behavior therapist, a cognitive behavioral or talk or play therapist, or a speech or occupational therapist, see what could be done virtually. Because I know it's hard to play over video chat, but you can at least, as a parent, get some coaching about what's going on with your child. Sure. This week I would focus on how's your child adjusting? What behaviors are they showing? What's cluing you into thinking that maybe they're anxious, maybe they're feeling off? Describe those behaviors to the therapist and get some tips on how they would manage it. One thing that I love about special ed teachers and therapists in and out of school is that they really get kids who are wired differently. I'll often say to parents, if my patient Johnny is struggling, I might say who in that school really gets him? Who gets how Johnny thinks, right? Talk to that person, get tips from that person. How would they handle a meltdown? How would they handle a specific negative behavior that you're seeing? What sort of reward system might they put in place? What sort of calming approaches might they put in place? So ask for that help. I think that the school teachers and therapists are so eager to be helpers right now that I hope that you'll get a positive response. When it comes to ABA is one of the main therapies for autism. And I've heard that some ABA centers are still doing the in-home therapy. They're just having one technician see each, child so that you're not getting multiple different people coming into your home. That's, a nice adjustment of your plans so that you can continue to get the therapy you need. But again, you'd need to check in day to day to see who has symptoms, who might have had sick contacts, and how everyone's feeling. So I think just one more thing I'll say about that is that you can also look at some of the big societies, like professional societies for like Autism Speaks or the American Speech and Hearing Association, and other groups that may be posting resources for families online right now. They may have some ideas of ways that you can implement some of the child's therapies at home in all your free time from work.
Exactly. So the next question, we're going to be talking about devices now.
Yeah.
I need to keep up with my job while I'm at home, so a tablet seems like a necessary evil, but it also seems to bring on irritability and bad behaviors. Do you advise allowing devices without the bad behavior that comes with them?
This is a very individual child and family question, mostly because, I'll give another story from my family. We haven't had a lot of tablets in a while, but I brought a few home from my lab just in case my kids would need them. One of my children does totally fine. He doesn't even notice that it's there. He just uses it when he needs it. The other one is like seeking it out like it was like candy. He's like trying to find it, asking me what he can download. They have different personalities, different relationships with technology like all kids do. So you may have to have different limits based on who your child is. You may have like very specific ways that you kind of get the tablet time done with at a certain part in the morning, again, making that structure and that plan of predictability, and then it goes away, and then it's not accessible, out of sight, out of mind, and you've planned other activities to do instead of that. Another thing about tablet time is like, well, what is the thing that tends to make a child irritable about it? For some kids, it's just its existence because it's such a forbidden fruit, or they find it so fun they prefer it to everything else. And in that case, again, having the clear expectations. This is when we can use it. This is when we are not going to use it. This is what we're going to do right after it to help them transition off of it. If it's the sort of games that are loaded onto that tablet that tend to make the child really, agitated or excited, or a lot of kids' apps and games are designed in very sticky ways that make kids want to come back and get more and more. If those apps and games are filled with, coins and stickers and all these virtual treats that, keep the child wanting more and more, you may want to avoid those types of apps because it's hard for a young mind to resist those. Children are so reward driven, so they may not want to put it down. You may want to instead choose designers that are not filling their apps with all those gimmicks. Like PBS Kids is one of those that's much more about more open-ended learning within their apps. You may also want some of that tech time to be, maybe they video chat with someone during that time, like a family member or things like that. And I also want to say that kids don't necessarily need the tablet to be successful in their educational goals during this time. If TV is a better fit in terms of watching some educational shows, watching some nature shows, and then being able to get your work done during that same time, you as a parent should feel totally empowered to say, this isn't fitting into our daily routine. This isn't necessarily something we need.
Perfect. And talking about routine, more broadly, what should I do if my child is acting up due to the change in routine?
Well, the first thing is to kind of check in with the emotional state of the whole family. Kids feed off of our heightened tension. Like many of us, you may be noticing your heart might be beating faster lately. You might be getting more headaches. You might have more stomach aches. You may feel more muscle tension. You may not. I mean, some people have that kind of physical response to stress, some don't. But if you are the sort of person who gets that sort of physical response, check in with that. Don't just power through it. Don't let it feed your anxiety, because sometimes when you feel gross, you then feel like, oh, things must really be bad then, right? So check in with yourself and be able to, take a, not just distance from other people, distance yourself from your emotions a little bit and say, how am I doing? Why am I thinking this way? What else could I be thinking right now? I realize why I'm getting so riled up about this. Other things that might cue you into, if you're feeling a bit more revved up, might being that you're snapping at people more often. That's totally normal, that you might be just quicker to react. You might be being more jumpy when you hear a loud noise or something, a door slams or something like that. If you're feeling that kind of keyed up nervous system response to stress, it's normal. But there's lots of things you can do. So I'll focus first on parents, what we can do to take down the kind of emotional, revved up state of the whole household. And then we'll talk about kids, okay? So first, for parents, the things, think about what calms you down. I ask this about parents in clinic all the time, about their kids. What calms your child down? What are the sorts of things that get their heart rate down, their stress response down? For some kids, it's music. For others, it's snuggling, it's touch. Touch is really important right now because we're all feeling so distant from others. So having some time where you might read and snuggle. Older kids may not want to snuggle, but at least you may all be sitting on the couch watching a nice movie or something else. You may have an animal at home. Animals are extremely helpful with people who are going through stressful or traumatic times. Animals also, especially dogs and cats, they have a bond with you, and they're able to sometimes sense when you're feeling overwhelmed. So, taking some time to have, petting and just spending time with an animal can be helpful for you or a child. Outdoors, just reset things a little bit, right? We may all be plugged into our phones, checking the news, checking updates, checking the numbers of cases. I mean, that feels like something we do to try to get control. So take a break from whatever your news or coronavirus monitoring habit might be. I mean, we all have one, and so
Sure.
or you may be trying to avoid it all. But taking a break from that so you can go outside and just look around. Take stock of what's going on in your neighborhood. Like I said, what the animals are doing, what nature is doing right now. That can be really regulating for a lot of families. And be okay with the fact that we're actually slowing down things a little bit. There's less to do. There's less entertainment options outside of your home. So you're kind of, hunkering down and getting used to a different pace of things. And then you can also, as a family, think about how you're reacting. Some families say, when you feel out of control, you try to control things more, right? You may be trying to nitpick on kids' behavior a little bit more. You might be trying to keep the house super, super clean, and it drives you crazy when someone spills something. You might be kind of more controlling over kids' behavior because it's really hard to watch your children be in distress, right? So I would take a moment to discuss with your family, if we're getting frustrated with each other, how do we want to communicate? Not being like, not our go-to yelling at each other, what's wrong with you, sort of things, saying things that have a more open communication style. I wonder how you're feeling, I wonder what we could do to make these afternoons feel a little bit better, because we all feel like we're a little bit jumpy. Now for kids, that communication style really matters too. Instead of saying, you need to do this, or you've got to do this, or you've got to stop that. Using ways that we use words to say, I think we could try this instead. Or where you try to shape a child's behavior. They may be coping one way, and you have to give them a replacement behavior, a new way to cope. My parents who see me in clinic hear me say this all the time. Think about replacement behaviors. Your child is showing their stress with one way. Help them know a better way to cope with it and to get those emotions out. And let them know, like Mr. Rogers said, emotions, we need to let kids know that emotions are okay. They're manageable.
Sure.
You're going to feel this way, but we need to know how to manage them the right way. So giving them some replacement behaviors and then rewarding them when they've made a nice, a nice accommodation to a new style of coping.
Thank you for that. We've had a few daycare questions, so let's circle back on that. An audience question: how are parents supposed to manage this with daycares still open? Should kids be sent to daycare?
That is a really tough and good question. I think that if you're, and I actually would probably want to maybe talk more with some of the infection control and public health folks before giving anyone a real specific answer on this. If you need daycare, you need daycare, right? If you need it and it's open and you're able to especially for families who have 2 doctors, right?
Sure.
In the family, that's a really important job for you to do. If you have nurses, if you have other people who are part of essential jobs right now, then daycares are important for the whole community, right? If there is a way for us to get some guidance about who are maybe the families who now can work from home and have their children stay at home with them, that would probably be better to minimize the number of person-to-person interactions, especially amongst kids. So I'm sorry I'm giving a pretty wishy-washy answer on that one, but I think there are so many different layers to that question that there's no single answer.
Absolutely. What should I do if my child is refusing to do schoolwork?
Okay, well, let's think through why they might be refusing. This is also my MO in clinic, is think about what your child's mental state is. Why are they showing the behavior that they're showing? For some kids, it may be this adjustment phase, this is a hard week for everyone, have low standards, just try and get a few things done every day that have some sort of educational or life skills goal to them, or that even are just about how are we all doing? How are we all coping? What is everyone thinking? Because by taking down that emotionally revved up state, you may get kids who can do a little bit more work next week. When you feel under threat and then someone places a demand on you, plenty of people will say, no, I cannot do that right now. My mind is not in any mental state to do that. So step 2 would be, what exactly is the type of work? Does the child have a reading disability or dyslexia, and they just don't want to do that reading work? Does the child struggle with a particular type of task? For many of my patients, it's written expression. They hate writing because it takes so many different parts of their brain to do it and to organize it, or it doesn't feel good with their hands. So there are things you can do to break down that really complex task into different little steps, or to accommodate to what's hard for the child. So for example, for writing, if a child knows what they want to say, but they just physically don't want to write it out, let them dictate it into a phone. In your notes thing in your iPhone or other aspects of Android phones, you can dictate what the child wants to say, and then they can read that and maybe write it out next, right? So these are all the strategies that teachers know really well, and you may want to check in with your child's teacher. What are the things that motivate my child? How do you usually tackle, this sort of math problem or this sort of academic task? Now, if it's all tasks altogether that the child is refusing, if you have if this is something you've struggled with for a while and you have a therapist or someone else who's kind of a go-to person for you, check in with that person. Make a phone call or a video call and say, give me some ideas of what we need to prioritize for this child. Because they know the child and are going to be able to give you much more individualized advice. And then finally, I'd say having that structure to the day. That's first we're going to do this, then this, then this. Lets kids know we won't be asking you to do your reading work or your written expression, whatever their non-preferred activity is. It's not going to last forever. We're going to put on the timer for 20 minutes. We're going to have you do, just this number of problems. You break it down into smaller chunks, and you make an agreement with the child, okay, then what's going to happen right after? So they know there's an end in sight for that non-preferred task. They'll get a little bit of it done. And actually, sometimes just when they start, they're like, oh, that wasn't so bad, you know? Sometimes just that initiation of a challenging task is really hard for kids, especially when they're feeling stressed and they just want to exert tight control over their environment right now. And also, last point, give them another activity that gives them that sense of control and mastery. We all need that right now. So get it out in other ways. It might be that they're, learning, or they're good at something else. They might be good at art or music, or they might love video games that give them that sense of mastery. Don't let that take the whole afternoon, of course, but give them a little bit of time that they get some of that sense of mastery, and they may come up with it themselves. My little one sometimes just goes around, pretending to be, a Jedi Knight, and he will just, force move things and pretend that he's doing stuff. I'm not going to get in the way of that, even if he's being loud, because he is trying to exert some mastery in a time where we all would love some mastery.
Sure. Absolutely. So we've got about 7 minutes left, so let's try and answer a couple more questions. I know that I'm going to check with you and see if there's any last thoughts, and then we might have a hand washing video we can post too. So the first one up, do you have any ideas on how to keep teenagers engaged when all they want to do is play video games? Don't get me wrong, I'm super thankful that they have the online social life that they do because it's keeping them in touch with their friends. But they seem to see this as a one big vacation. Podcasts, videos. Should I let my child create a social media account to keep in touch with friends? Or any other suggestions? It's a big question.
That is, yes. And it is, again, it's all about who your individual child is and why do you think they're having this reaction to this change in our, in our schedule and our lives right now. Many kids may be coping with the stress by being like, woohoo, yay, it's a vacation, and they make light of it, right? When they may actually be a little bit frustrated or upset about what's going on. So think about the ways that your family can facilitate some time where you actually talk or get some of those emotions out. It may not be direct talking, like over the dinner table, being like, how are you feeling? But it may be having a kind of time where you are playing soccer together, you're playing basketball, you are doing something physical, you are doing something that's a little bit more creative, and you can get them to express themselves a little bit more. And when you've entered their world and their way of thinking, it's easier to motivate them, right? If you just look at that and say, he's being lazy, I can't believe he's doing this, I'm just going to make some rules and he's got to follow them. That often fails because kids clamp down even harder and dig their heels in. So the more you can enter your child's world and say, why are they reacting this way? How can we get on the same page and collaboratively, like I mentioned before, the collaborative problem solving of, hey, teenager, give me some solutions about how we should run these days. You may say, I want my own social media account so I can post my own videos. And you're allowed to say as a parent, no, I don't think we should do that, but what could we do similarly that would achieve the same goal? If the goal of that is keeping in touch with your friends, let's talk about when you can have some more video chats or more kind of funny TikTok videos that you share with each other, or some other ways that you and that you contain this. By having the daily schedule, you're able to hopefully transition kids off of the technology that they're using so that they can come have dinner with you, or they can come outside and play some sports with you or take a walk around the block.
Fantastic, thank you. The next question we have up, my kids seem to want to snack all day while we're at home. Their meals are something of a joke. Any tips to keep them from snacking all day?
So again, snacking is either kind of an individual characteristic of kids, that some kids just love that feeling of eating. It sometimes is sensory, it sometimes is that they find such pleasure in eating. For other kids, it could be stress-induced, that when you eat, it reduces your cortisol. So you can have some kids who are like, I'm bored, I don't know what else to do, I don't have a plan, let me go get some fruit snacks. So the more you can have, structure to your day so that children know when the meals are and when is a typical time for snacks. When would they have snacks in school? They may announce at 10:30, I'm ready for, I'm hungry again. And that's a normal time to have a snack, but maybe keep the same types of foods and snacks that they might have packed in their lunchbox so that it can stay similar to what they were doing in school. And number two is just a practical strategy of having snacks, the only ones that kids can reach and access really easily, being the healthiest ones that you wouldn't mind them snacking on, whether it's fruits or other kind of low calorie and healthy snacks, and having things kind of physically separated based on where you've stored them, so that they have to ask you for help to reach them, basically.
That sounds like a great strategy. Thank you for answering such a broad amount of questions. As things moving forward in the coming weeks, I'm sure there will be more questions. We might well schedule another Facebook Live on these topics. But for now, as we come to the end of our chat, what do you think that we've missed? And do you have any takeaways for anybody?
I think that the takeaways, I think we've really covered a lot of the questions that I've been hearing from families. My takeaways would mostly be just be easy on yourself. Really use this as a time to reflect on how you're feeling, how your family is coping, how you best want your family to structure your day and communicate. Have a sense that you're not alone in all of this, that everyone is struggling with similar things. Maybe reach out to people that you may not have had contact with, and just check in on how they're doing. I got a text from a friend in Norway. It's just amazing to be in contact with people who around the world are going through different things, at similar things, just in different time points. So that's one thing. Having that feeling of connectedness, even though we have social distance right now. Practice with your kids, maybe at the end of the day, being grateful for a couple of things of what you're grateful for. We can all get really caught in a spinning mind state of what's wrong and what's changing and what we don't know. But allowing your family to have a mindset of we are in this together and we're taking care of each other and we're grateful for the things we have, I think will help settle things down a bit so that learning can happen, so coping can happen, and so families, parents themselves can stay sane through this challenge. So please, if you want us to come back and answer more questions, please keep posting them and let us know, because we are happy to help, and we're really grateful again for all the hard work you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your expertise, for your time, Dr. Radesky. For more information and resources to help navigate this difficult time, you can also visit motchildren.org. So thank you to our viewers, and we are going to close on our Michigan Medicine hand washing video. So have a good afternoon.
Thanks.
Want to cut your chance of getting sick or making other people sick? Clean your hands. It only takes 20 seconds to do it right, getting all the surfaces of your hands clean. How long is 20 seconds? The University of Michigan fight song can help you remember. Don't forget to let it all evaporate before touching anything or anyone else. Now, soap and water. And it doesn't have to be hot water. Cold or warm is fine, and it doesn't dry your skin out as much. If you can see dirt or grime on your hands, or you just use the toilet, use soap and water if you possibly can. Otherwise, alcohol-based cleaners are just as good. Of course, you can use another song to remember the right amount of time to clean your hands, but we like this one.